On this episode of Marketing Mavericks, we talked to Polina Raygorodskaya about being a co-founder and CEO of Wanderu.com. It's all about ground transportation, targeting millennials, and being a female in the tech startup space. Coming up next.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth from Marketing Mavericks is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com. It's time for TWiT's annual audience survey, and we want to hear from you. Please visit twit.tv/survey and let us know what you think. It only takes a few minutes, and your anonymous feedback will help us make TWiT even better. We thank you so much for your continued support. twit.tv/survey.
This is Marketing Mavericks, episode 48, recorded Thursday, March 26, 2015. Wanderu CEO Polina Raygorodskaya. Welcome to Marketing Mavericks, where we talk about everything at the intersection of marketing and technology. And today we're going to talk all about ground transportation, the startup business, the business of startups, and how to get funding and how to be a female entrepreneur in the tech era. I'm Tonya Hall, your host of Marketing Mavericks. Hello, everybody. And we've got our technical director, Anthony Nielsen.
Hey, Tonya.
Hey. And our technical director in training, right?
Oh, yeah.
Darwin.
There we go. Sitting behind me.
Wait, is he sleeping on the job?
Yeah.
Darwin.
Well, actually, today's his last day.
What? Is it really?
Yeah, he's being adopted, so.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
Darwin found a family.
Forever.
So we're going to have a new trainee, right?
Yeah.
I'm excited. Is it going to be a cat this time? Because
No.
What?
Cats are really hard to train.
Yeah, well. And our guest who's joining us today, I'm super excited about. She's amazing, and she's got a great story to tell and what she's doing. And her name is Polina Raygorodskaya, the CEO
Thank you.
and co-founder of Wanderu.com, by the way.
Thank you for having me, Tonya. I'm very excited to be on the show.
So, what a beautiful name. You're Russian, and you have the most amazing Russian name ever. So love that.
Thank you.
And Wanderu, which is all about, it's kind of, I think you've referred to it as the kayak for ground transportation, right?
Yeah, that's a very easy way to put it. Wanderu is the simplest way to find and book bus and train travel. So we work with all of the largest ground travel providers in North America to help people find how to get from point A to point B using non-air transportation.
Which is a thing. In fact, when I grew up, it wasn't necessarily a thing to use train. Although little thing for me is I actually love trains. I'm fascinated by trains. I love the way they sound. They're very nostalgic, but that's a thing now. Younger generations are actually looking for different types of transportation outside of the traditional, driving and that sort of thing. And that's something that you're feeling the niche for. So I want to back up into that. I want to talk about what your background is, what you have been doing. And you started off not at all as a tech entrepreneur necessarily, but in fashion, and PR, which is completely different than founding a tech startup. What brought you to this idea that you needed to be in the startup space?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think the best problems are solved when you have them yourself. It's easy to kind of sit there and say, oh, what are the problems in this world? And, am I the person to do it? But I think in order for you to be able to really solve a problem, you need to experience it firsthand and be able to be passionate about solving that problem. So my background is, in fact, not in transportation. I started my first company, Polina Fashion, when I was a sophomore at Babson College. Initially started producing fashion shows, and then that led to representing designers and doing PR. And so by junior year, I was named one of Business Week's top 25 entrepreneurs under 25. And upon graduating, I decided I wanted to continue running the PR firm. And so I moved to New York and opened up an office there. But I maintained my office in Boston because my initial clients were from there and also my family was from there. And so I would travel back and forth between New York and Boston, usually about travel by bus. The reason why I traveled by bus wasn't because I couldn't afford other forms of transportation, because at that point I could, but because it was convenient, it was on demand, I can book my tickets last minute. But most importantly, there were these new types of bus lines that I had launched that offered power outlets and Wi-Fi. And so for me, there's this huge value proposition to be able to get on a bus and plug in my computer and turn it into a mobile office during that 4-hour trip versus being stuck in traffic while I'm driving. But despite the fact that traveling by bus was super convenient, I found the booking process to be a huge headache, because be running around New York City, I would get a call that I have to go back to Boston to meet a client. I'd have to, pull out my mobile phone, go to whatever bus company's website I could remember, which at the time didn't have a mobile site. And so I'd have to go to a local Starbucks, plug in my computer, and then I literally have to go to 10 different websites to see who's traveling at the time I want to travel and for what price, because there's just so many different options going between major cities. In fact, there are more options going between major cities than there are flying in the same cities as well. And so I found the process to be a huge headache, and that's kind of what really inspired me to want to solve that, not just for myself, but for all the other people that were traveling by bus, which happens to be 74% millennials, the demographic of people that kind of grew up using the internet and have as little patience as I do for that type of, scenario and bad technology.
It's funny that, this conversation I was having with somebody that is in the travel space. He's like, why would you take a bus? Why would you not just, but this is somebody who's actually using Uber, who's using, different forms of transportation. I take a bus. Somebody asked me why I do this. I take a bus to the airport. I don't have to deal with parking. They've got Wi-Fi. It's almost like a little relaxing, I can, just enjoy myself on the way. I don't have to deal with traffic. So it is a thing. And younger generations are looking at not buying cars, but they're looking at actually using other types of transportation. And I think this is, why you've probably, you received an award, I think it was a couple of years ago in South by Southwest. You received the Accelerator Award. You've received several rounds of funding. How much funding have you had so far?
We raised a little over $8 million total, I think.
You've had some interesting...
We've gone through 2 rounds.
There you go. And you've had some interesting investors, including Shark Tank. I'm trying to remember her name now. Barbara, right?
Corcoran.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's correct.
And 500 Startups has been a part of getting you guys going. Why did you decide to go for funding and have investors? Because that's a big decision that you have to make early on. Am I going to try to do this myself? Am I going to try to, allow investors to come in? What was that process? What did that look like for you?
I mean, we have to build a really complicated technology that has never existed in this space before, that consists of standardizing millions of data points across, hundreds of providers, that there's no way that you can build without having some really talented engineers, and engineers are not cheap. So we knew kind of from the beginning when I started the company with 2 other people, my initial co-founder, who we came up with the idea together, and then we brought on a third co-founder, Eddie Wong, our CTO. And so the 3 of us initially kind of started building out the idea, but we realized very quickly that we would need to have a team of very talented people to help us create a great company and solve this problem for people that are traveling by bus and train. And so we knew from the beginning that we would need to raise money. We first kind of built out a minimal viable product prior to going out and doing that, and proved that we could get the right partners on board, the right kind of people and advisors on board. One of our earliest advisors was the former CEO of Greyhound, Craig Lynch, who joined as an advisor initially, then came on as an investor, and now he's on our board of directors. And so we kind of, when I thought, okay, how can I solve this problem, the only way to do it is to surround ourselves with the best possible people that can help us do that, whether that be on our team side and the people that we hire, or advisors, investors. And that's when we raise money from investors, we are very selective with investors we bring on board as well. We also have some great venture funds that are Alta Ventures, which is based out of Mexico, that made introductions to kind of all of the major bus companies there. Metamorphic, which is a great fund in New York. We also have Jeff Clark as an investor, who's the former chairman of Orbitz, who's definitely understands everything there is to understand in the travel space as well. So we kind of looked at it as we want to build this company. What are the resources that we need to get there?
Now, you mentioned Greyhound specifically, and Greyhound at one point was in bankruptcy. I mean, this was an industry, ground transportation was struggling. Greyhound specifically was struggling. They've since come out of that. But how has that had an impact on the leadership that he brought to helping you guys? I mean, was there some takeaways from the bankruptcy process that has helped you? I mean, how did that play in?
So Craig actually came in when Greyhound was bankrupt. He raised private equity money and bought it out and turned it around to making its first $1 billion. So he was actually the one that kind of pulled Greyhound out of bankruptcy, and did it more than once. Actually, he had left Greyhound again after he put in a new CEO, and then they were having some more problems, and he came back and continued to lead efforts there as well. So he definitely knows how to build a great business.
Polina, how are you letting people know about this? I mean, so let's get to the marketing of it. And I want to ask the questions about, in the chat room has certainly had some good questions that I've already got prepared to ask you about being a female in this space and that sort of thing. And we'll get to that. But how are you letting people know that this service exists? How are you putting it in front of people besides, the announcement at South by Southwest? How are you reaching people?
We've been growing about 200% in users quarter over quarter. So we're growing very fast. The bulk of our users come from either organic search or PR. We've gotten a ton of kind of features in various publications. We just last month were featured in Time Magazine and The Economist. We've been featured in pretty much every major publication out there because we provide a great service and experience for people that are traveling by bus that no one's ever been able to do before. Word of mouth and our retention rates are really high as well. So people that find Wanderu that have used the product, they spread the word and they also come back. About 40% of all the people that have come and purchased tickets on Wanderu.com have come back and purchased tickets on a separate day. So we've been really kind of fortunate in terms of when we think about creating a product, we think about creating the best possible user experience, because ultimately if somebody comes to our site and they love that experience and they come back, then it makes our marketing a million times easier, because one, that person keeps coming back, and two, that person will hopefully spread the word to their friends. And so that's been mostly what's been happening, that we've created such a great user experience, and we provide customer service. We provide kind of very hands-on help to our users in making their travel planning easier. And so people have been coming back and they've been spreading the word.
How does that customer service part work? And we hear all the time about brands, businesses, especially in the service space, who have a really bad customer service. And sometimes people feel, trapped into using their product because they don't have a choice, or their service. People do have a choice when it comes to scheduling travel, maybe not airplane, but certainly by, but not always. I mean, so how are you approaching customer service? Do you have a live chat? Can people call you?
Yeah, so most of our services provided via live chat. So if you log on to Wanderu right now, there's a live chat through Olark, and it allows you to interact with one of the people on our team. We do all of our customer service in-house, and customer service is so important to the core of our business that we actually train every single person that's part of the Wanderu team in customer service. So from engineers to, marketing, operations, everybody. So one day every quarter, each person has to spend at least some time either answering customer chats or responding to customer emails. And this allows us to let the team stay connected with what's most important to our users, because ultimately engineers are building a product for our users. So if you don't know what bothers our users or how to solve those problems, then you're way disconnected between what you're building and who the end user is. And so we provide all the customer service in-house. We do have a dedicated staff that's responsible for interacting with customers, but every single member of our team spends at least one day each quarter interacting with our users as well via live chat or emails.
T-Mobile does that. T-Mobile has their management team, including their top management team, get on the phones with customers once a month. And I think that's a really healthy way to look at staying connected to the customer. What about loyalty and retention? You're new, so you want to make sure these people do come back. And you said that statistically that's the case. They are coming back. They are using your service again. What kind of loyalty and retention programs do you have, or do you see yourself having?
So right now we don't really have any specific loyalty program in place. That is something that we're kind of looking into, especially, creating kind of a point system and stuff like that. We haven't really done much of that yet. We have only been live for about a year and a half, so there's still a whole lot of things that we want to do that we haven't had a chance to do yet. Thus far, just from users that have come once, loved their experience and decided to come back on their own. We've done some kind of giveaways and stuff like that to get people continuing to interact. But that's about it.
Well, let's talk about the ramp up, because you mentioned how long you've been in business and the fact that you are continuing to get more and more users. You're clearly gaining ground each month, each quarter. What was the initial thought around acquisition? And this actually came up in the chat room. How did you decide this is our acquisition cost? This is what it's going to cost us, and this is what we need to charge for a service, or this is the percentage that we need from each ticket that we sell? Like, where did that initial math come into play? Was it from your founders? Was it from or your investors, your chair people? Or how did you know what show your work? How did you know what to do?
Yeah, I mean, when we were initially starting out, before we even built the product, we created landing pages in a funnel through Google to see at least how much it would cost us to get somebody to give us an email to say that they were interested in this service. And so what we did is we set up kind of custom landing pages for, say, like Boston to New York, or Boston to New York bus, and then we would pay, set bids on AdWords. We set a budget, say $100 just to kind of play around with it, and would test out the bids to see how much it would cost to get people to click. And then once they clicked, it would say, search for a bus from Boston to New York, or search all the different options, whatever it was. And then we would test how many people actually clicked the search button. And then once they clicked the search button, it would say, we're coming, or we're in private beta, we're coming soon, give us your email to get access to the beta.
So how many customers have you actually serviced? And what are you projecting, I think, for the rest of 2015?
So we've had over 6 million users since we launched. I don't have hard numbers for what we're going to have by the end of 2016, but we've been growing about 200% quarter over quarter. And so the 6 million was in about a year and a half. So I'm sure anybody who's good with math can probably calculate that better than me.
To show your work. So I want to talk a little bit about being a female in this space, and especially specifically in the tech industry, but also being a founder. Has that presented you with any challenges? Do you think your experience is different being a female versus your maybe male counterparts?
I think that's a very challenging question, simply because I've never experienced being a male,
right,
and doing the same thing.
What? Okay.
So I have to say, I was a little concerned going into the bus travel space as a woman, because it is a heavily male-dominated industry. And so I remember in the beginning I was thinking, if I go to meetings, I need to bring along my male co-founder, because otherwise maybe they won't take me seriously. And I have to say that I've never, I think a lot of it has been my own, especially in the beginning, it was my own insecurity, about what things might be like, than the actual reality. When I actually met the people that I would be going to meetings with, they respected me. They treated me just as well as they treated, probably even better than they treated my co-founder. So I think that a lot of people are afraid to enter into the tech space or heavily male-dominated spaces, because they think that they will be, treated in a bad way, or maybe they won't be taken seriously. And that insecurity kind of prevents people from doing it. Based on my own experience, once I went past that insecurity and went to meetings and met with owners of multi-billion-dollar companies, I did not feel like they treated me any less than if I were a male. In the tech space, I feel the same way, although it's a little bit different, especially when it comes to fundraising, because you have so many, male VCs, that it's a little bit of a, it's a little intimidating. But we've been very supported by the funds that have put in money in us. Both Alta Ventures and Metamorphic have invested in other female founders and are very female founder friendly. And we've not had any bad experiences with them, nor any feeling that, they treat me any different as a female founder. So I've been very lucky there. It's about, there may be some funds that are different. There may be some people in the tech space that think differently. But at this point, it's such a small world that it kind of gets around, and you kind of, if you treat female founders in a bad way, people are going to find out about it, and it's going to ruin your reputation. So I think it's definitely gotten a lot better. I'm very disappointed and sad that there aren't more female founders out there, and that it is such a challenge for females to raise funding. I hope that changes over the next several years.
You gave a TED Talk actually about overcoming fear. You mentioned fear a minute ago, and I think we've all been there where fear actually prevented us from moving forward with some sort of career move or a step in our life. And the fear is the biggest challenge we have. And I watched your TED Talk. It was inspiring, and you're definitely inspiring. What are you doing to kind of help other women in the space? Or do you have time? I mean, seriously, you're starting a huge company that's going to take a lot of growth in getting the kind of data and the infrastructure built that you need. But is that something that you want to do?
Absolutely. I mean, and it's not just women. I want to be supportive of other entrepreneurs in general. I like to spend time talking to startups. I don't have a whole lot of extra time, as you say, running a business, and then also traveling as much as I travel, whether it's to meet partners or, I'm giving talks and investors. And so I'm on the road a lot. So that makes it a little bit of a challenge. However, one of the things that I really want to do is to get young people that are still in high school, especially that come from kind of underprivileged neighborhoods that weren't able to see a good positive role model growing up, and help support them and help them realize that they can achieve anything that they want to achieve. My family background, we came to the U.S. when I was 4. My parents had, aside from myself, my mom was pregnant with my younger brother, and I had an older brother. So they came here with basically nothing except for 3 children. And, my father took a computer class and learned to program, and then kind of worked his way up and became very successful. And all the while having a whole family to take care of. So I think people that are younger that don't have those responsibilities have no excuse, right? There's kind of sky is the limit as to what you can achieve. It's about having a positive role model. I think coming from an immigrant family and seeing my parents, succeed and live the American dream, and not just for themselves, but also raise children, and move from a country to a whole new country where they didn't speak the language at all, is very inspirational. And that is something that I would really want to spend more time doing once I, have some more free time, is spend time with people that are maybe in high school that don't know what path to go down, or maybe don't have the role models that I was lucky enough to have growing up, and inspire them to, do their own thing.
Well, I definitely think that you're inspiring women to kind of look at, taking the chance to get out there. So let's talk about the partner relationships that you have and how you actually approach, from a marketing standpoint or a business standpoint, getting the partners that you need. Were initially, let's just say this, were they open to your type of service? Did you find any resistance in the beginning?
Absolutely. Yeah, they were not very open. And not just that, but it's kind of, the bus industry is run by, oftentimes it's family businesses that are passed on from generation to generation. And they're not necessarily open to change. At least many of them are not. And so we had a lot of challenges kind of in the beginning, just convincing them why they need something like this, why this is important, making them understand who their demographic is and how they're, missing out on creating something for this demographic that will basically propel their sales. The things, our technology does things that no other technology does. We're a point-to-point search, so we help people find the closest bus station to them. We route multiple providers together to help people get to more destinations, and we also allow people to search in any language. And so this really, we also integrate transit directions to get to and from the station. So it's really kind of a true point-to-point search. And so these technologies that we've built have increased our partners' sales on average by over 20% in incremental sales, because at least 20% of the sales that our partners get are as a result of these technologies that people would not be able to buy through our partners' websites, whether that's, the nearby station locator, because our partners' websites only allow people to search from station to station, or the routing capabilities, which basically give them a network of, North American carriers. And so these technologies have really increased our partners' sales. Our partners have added additional routes and frequency because of demand that has been brought by our customers. And so, once we were able to convince them, hey, we can provide you something of value that you can't get anywhere else, they've been really happy.
How are you marketing? Because I would think, older generations would look at bus travel and train travel and say, gosh, I would never do that. That's not something that I'm comfortable with. We established early in this conversation that's a younger marketing approach. It's a younger target. Does the bus industry, does the train industry, do they understand that they have a younger audience? Did they already know that, or is that an introduction that you made to them?
I think it's a little bit of both, because this is a really new phenomenon. About a decade ago, the type of people that travel by bus tended to be older and tended to be kind of people that couldn't afford other forms of transportation. And then about 7-8 years ago, when the new types of bus companies started coming into the market and offering power outlets and Wi-Fi, it attracted a completely new demographic that kind of grew up using the internet, wants to stay connected, as you mentioned, is less likely to own a car, depends on public transportation. And so bus companies are only, many companies have been around for 100 years, but only over the past 8 years has the demographic that they've been catering to shifted. And so some of them haven't yet caught on to the fact that this is who's traveling by bus. But some have, and some are trying to, meet those demands. And that's why they've been more open to work with us, because they realize that we do provide a technology that millennials love.
You've boasted that you've not spent a whole lot of money on marketing, that you've got organic growth by word of mouth. What kind of marketing have you done are you floating on the marketing of the service actually itself, the trains, the Amtraks, the bus services?
So we've done a good amount of kind of SEO and optimization. We have a blog. We're actually actively looking for a great content director. If you know of anybody who's
okay, you hear that.
Said what did you say?
Hey everybody, listen up. She's hiring
exactly.
a content director.
Yeah, so somebody that can help kind of, build the brand around writing and inspiring people to travel. But then aside from that, we have spent some money on online marketing, AdWords, Facebook. We have now a blue bus that's driving between New York and Albany around New York City. That is really awesome. So one of our partners, New York Trailways, we wrapped one of their buses for the Albany to New York route. And so we have some really cool kind of ads on the bus. We also are doing some on-campus advertising at some of the campuses around the country. So but less than 10% of our traffic right now comes from any paid sources.
Well, and I think because it's still very early, and I think, again, you decide how you're going to travel. You're using your service is really you're trying to make it easier for people, kind of like a kayak or maybe a Orbitz or something like that. So if you're developing this partner relationship, you have to go into negotiations. So let's talk about the sales aspect of it. How were the negotiations, as far as, I'm assuming that you get a percentage of each ticket that's sold?
Yes, that's correct.
And were those negotiations easy? I mean, they've obviously seen the growth of people purchasing tickets through your service. I know, though, when I've talked like in the hotel industry, it's actually sometimes, the hotels themselves try to encourage you to call them directly rather than using some other services. But it makes it easier to compare, right? So how do you navigate that relationship with the actual, the trains, the Amtraks, the buses, all that? How do you navigate that relationship to continue to make sure, again, it goes back to loyalty or retention, getting people to come back to your service versus just going straight after they've purchased that first ticket, going straight to the train or the bus themselves?
I mean, if you've ever booked a ticket on Wanderu and then booked a ticket on, one of the company's websites, you will see the difference in the experience. Ultimately, it's about creating something that people love and making it as simple as possible for them to book their trip. We can't ever kind of guarantee that everybody's always going to come back. However, our numbers show that most people do. And that's really because they love the user experience. Negotiations aren't easy, but aside from just a comparison service, which we provide as well, we also provide a lot of tools that make travel easier, whether that's, maps to show them how to get to and from the station, integrate transit directions that people can email themselves those directions right from our search. We recently launched an app, which was named one of Apple's best new apps in the App Store the day that it launched. And that app allows people to do mobile boarding, to save history, to do a lot of things that make that, booking process a lot easier. Routing, all of the different technologies that I described earlier really are something that people can only get through Wanderu and make that search and booking process so much easier. And that keeps people coming back as well.
And that's not just, is that just here in the United States, or is this a global tool that people can use? Like, if I pull up Google, I can look at what transit, what transportation is available. Is this Wanderu? Can I do that with Wanderu yet?
No, right now we're North America, so primarily the U.S. and Southern Canada will be expanding throughout Mexico and Canada over the next 6 months.
Wow. That's good. So you have obviously got projected that. I'm going to be in Russia in May, so that's probably not going to happen, right?
We'll be in Russia yet in May.
Well, darn it. So what would you do differently? I mean, you've talked about, year and a half, I think you said, since launch. What have you learned that you would say, I would go back a year and a half ago and I would do one thing differently? What would that be?
I honestly don't think I have any regrets in anything that I've done in life.
Good.
And I don't think that anybody should have regrets. I think everything, there's a famous saying in Russian that says, that basically translates, everything that doesn't happen happens for the best. So it's the kind of similar to what they say in the US, where you say everything happens for a reason. However, that makes it seem like you have no control over life. But I like the saying, everything that doesn't happen happens for the best. And for me, that's always turned out. There have been times when, I remember being really stressed out and afraid that things were falling apart, and we didn't sign the contract we wanted to sign that day, or like they said that they won't be available for another 3 months or something like that. And then a year later we reflected on it and we're like, we wouldn't have been ready then anyways. So it's the best thing that could have happened, because if they actually were ready to move forward then, and it took us 6 months to build something, we would have lost our credibility. So things, basically, when you think that things are really bad, when you reflect on it, at least for me, down the line, it turns out, that's probably the best thing that could have happened to us.
Yeah, that I totally agree with that. I think sometimes, and sometimes you come back around full circle, right? So, okay, so as far as the demographic, you mentioned where you're going to be rolling out. How are you planning that? I mean, how do you decide, okay, this is the next rollout's going to be in Mexico, the next rollout's going to be in Canada, or, the chat room saying this would be really popular in India. How are you deciding what markets to go to next?
Yeah, I mean, North America, that was always our kind of first market and plan, because you can take a bus literally from Mexico all the way up to Canada. There are laws that have been passed that allow kind of the cross-border, really easy kind of transport. And so we look at it as kind of one massive geographical area. And then from there, we look at a mix of things. What is the demand from our existing users? What are they asking us for? We spend a lot of time kind of getting feedback from our users to understand how we can provide a better service for them. And also what other markets are there out there that have a large, market share of bus travel that don't have a good resource for it, that we could take the model that we've built and expand it there. And so we try to balance those things out. Some other markets we're looking at is other places in Latin America and Europe. Actually, there is several companies that do this in India. In fact, the first success story was a company called Redbus, which started a similar service in India like more than 5 years ago. And then they sold that service to a big kind of massive company for a couple $100 million. So they turned out okay. And they're still up and running. So whoever was asking about India, there's several companies that do this there. And we try not to just kind of jump on the bandwagon and expand wherever everybody else is doing it. We'd rather really take this and figure out where can our service be most useful for our users and for users there as well.
Well, and I would think that, especially from a marketing standpoint or even a customer service standpoint, you've got you in marketing, you run into how do you market to customers in different geographic areas? How do you handle the customer service? Because socially we're different, the culture is different. What are you putting in place to make sure that you're ready to handle some of those issues? And we see that in telecommunications. You call your cable company, you're not necessarily talking to somebody in the United States. They don't understand what your issues are. Travel, I would think, it's going to be an emergency like situation where, hey, I need to get a bus, I need help. Are you prepared to handle some of those challenges? Or are you using a service? Are you bringing in advisors on how to maybe handle the marketing and customer service approach in those new markets?
Yeah, I mean, we hire a country manager for, each country that we expand to. And also we try to find, investors, advisors. So the reason why we chose Alta Ventures as our seed investor was because they're the largest venture fund in Mexico. They have all of the relationships in Mexico. Their LPs consist of all of the largest kind of companies or families that run massive companies in Mexico. And so we realized really quickly, in order for us to do business outside of the US, we need to find people that understand the countries that we go into that can help us, as we build and grow. And so we have country managers that understand those markets and can help build out a team in each of the countries as we expand.
When you launch in these new markets, I mean, are you getting them to help you set your goals, your acquisition, like what you expect, and how are you using social media to do some of that? Because you talked about using social media, maybe travel bloggers. Travel industry is huge. There's tons of travel bloggers for hotel, for all kinds of resort. I'm connected to a lot of them, and it's a busy industry. How are you tapping into that?
So the first question.
Yeah, I did
locally,
ask you a compound question. Sorry about that. First rule, don't do that.
So the first question about, what we expect the people that are running, the operations in a particular country, it's literally setting up a team that can execute everything from, operations to business development to marketing to that particular, because marketing is very different in each country and from culture to culture. So what might work in the US won't necessarily work in Mexico, won't necessarily work in Europe. It's all kind of different. And so we really want to make sure that people really understand those cultures and how to best market there. In terms of social media, we really want to build a brand around, travel for millennials. That's really kind of what we're building here. We look at bus and train travel as like the first step in that process, because so many people within this demographic travel by bus, and it's one of those problems that we've solved that they can't find anywhere else. And it's such a massive problem. There's actually more people traveling by bus than there are flying in the US and in North America. And so as we build out our brand, it's about creating really good content. I think content is extremely important, and not just like going and interacting on social media. I think that's important too, and interacting with the customer and speaking to who your customer is, responding to them. For millennials, that's especially important. If somebody is complaining to you on social media, you want to respond and acknowledge them. But aside from that, it's about creating really useful, addictive content, and that's one of the things that we want to focus on and what we're hiring a content director for.
Addictive content. I love it. I love addictive content. That's a great way to refer to that. So I think if you've worked in the private sector and you've worked in the government sector, they do operate differently. And somebody in the chat room brought this up, and I think it's an excellent point. How are you managing relationships working with private sector businesses, privately owned businesses, or public businesses versus something that's maybe city government run? Are you running into any, challenges doing both, or do you have a team that's prepared to do that?
Yeah, I mean, we have partnerships that, we have partnerships that are both government and privately owned. And I have to say, everything that involves the government takes probably at least three times longer.
Of course.
So that's one of the challenges, as a startup.
Uh-oh.
Want things to happen quickly, and it drives me crazy when they don't. So personally, that's been a challenge for me, is just, understanding the process is a little different with kind of when you're dealing with government versus, but I mean, honestly, big companies sometimes take forever too, but government definitely takes probably 3 times longer even than the big companies.
Yeah. And I worked in the space where we had to deal with private and government would just be just a huge struggle. And I would think, especially in the startup industry where you're trying to move forward, you're trying to get things moving aggressively. And to your point, it takes so much longer to make that happen. You guys are a really interesting product. I think this travel industry in general is interesting. We have a guy here who's handles our IT, Russell, who's kind of my go-to travel expert, and he's always got all this great advice on, he's the one that helped me find my trip to Russia, which I'm very excited about. Have you been back to Russia since you left as a young girl?
I have been back several times to St. Petersburg and several times to Moscow. I was born in St. Petersburg. Where in Russia are you traveling to?
Well, my friends are in Moscow, but I do want to head over to St. Petersburg for a little while. So spend some time
make sure
there.
you do.
Yeah, that's what everybody says. I know. So
St. Petersburg is beautiful. It's definitely, it's a whole other world from Moscow. Moscow is a huge city. It's very kind of international. It's very crowded. Highly recommend getting around by public transportation instead of a car, because the city has a massive traffic problem, just congestion everywhere. It literally takes hours to get from, just a few miles. So I highly recommend avoiding being in a car as much as possible. St. Petersburg is just beautiful. It's a very beautiful city.
This is not good news, Polina. This is not what I want to hear.
But sorry, just warning you.
I appreciate it. I'm really interested in what you're doing. I'd love to have you. You're in Boston, though, right now?
I'm in Boston.
Love to have you. If you're ever in San Francisco and you can make it out to the TWiT studio, we're in Petaluma. We're just north of San Francisco Bay Area. We'd love to have you in studio. Totally.
Yeah, I would love that. Absolutely. Would be happy to.
I love what you're doing. I think what you're doing is really interesting, and I'm excited to see the space grow and understand better how millennials are actually using transportation and see that industry change. If somebody wants to follow you, if they want to maybe use your app, if they want to, I don't know, maybe they want to apply for this job that you just talked about and they're really excited to work for you, how should they connect with you?
So I can be reached via email. My email is polina@wanderu.com, or on Twitter, it's @PolinaTravels. That's POLINATRAVELS.
There you go. What's your favorite way to travel? You can tell me, nobody's listening.
Bus, of course. That's why I started the company.
The bus.
And I hate flying. Bus and train. I mean, I love traveling by train as well. It's comfortable. You get to see places that you can't see when you fly. I mean, for me, I did a basically road trip from Boston to Austin for South by Southwest, and we turned it into like a 6-day road trip. We stopped in Nashville. We stopped in for a night in New Orleans for 2 nights, and also in Birmingham, Alabama. So it was really cool because we turned it into this road trip that, oftentimes people rent a car and you have to drive, but here, we're going by bus and train and got to see the country and didn't have to spend our time stuck, driving in traffic.
I can't tell you how much I really like taking the bus to the airport. I just feel relaxed. I'm not stressed about it. I know the bus driver's professional. He's going to get me there. And there's Wi-Fi. Hello?
Yeah, absolutely.
I can watch a movie.
That's the most important thing. Exactly.
Or, work. Movie.
Yeah, that's usually what happens.
I think, again, I'm really excited about just what you're doing. I'd love to meet you in person. And I
would love that
too. In the studio. Thanks again for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me. Sorry for the internet cutout.
Hey, no worries. We overcome things here. We overcome it.
That's perfect.
Thanks again. We'll talk soon.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Absolutely. Super exciting in the space of travel and just targeting millennials and what that looks like. We heard about being a startup, a founder. And if you want to follow her, you can do that. I'm actually going to be following her as well. She's, I'm going to say this, Polina Raygorodskaya. Oh, I think I did it better the first time. Anyway, she is the CEO and co-founder of Wanderu.com, and it's a really interesting company that's doing some neat stuff. So hopefully you'll check it out. You can follow me on Twitter by going to @TonyaHallRadio on Twitter. I'm not yet meerkatting, but I might, I don't know, I might start. Jeffrey Needles totally has it dominated. And if you want to email the show, you can. You can email us your ideas, your suggestions. I do read your emails. You can email to Mavericks@TWiT.tv. And I started something new. We're starting something new this show. If you have an interesting way that you use marketing, maybe social media, and you send me a quick Vine on maybe your favorite app or your favorite website, I'd love to see it. And we'll be using one of those on the show. Yep, that's right. We're going to feature your idea on how you use social media. You send it to me in emails, and I see all kinds of great information in chat. Well, I'd love to share it with our audience. So you can email those Vine videos or maybe use hashtag Marketing Mavericks on Twitter. I'll find them. Or you can, like I said, email me. You can email me at mavericks@twit.tv. And until next week, everybody, have a good one.